Mr. Goran Radovanovic from Serbia. He's a member of the European Film Academy, Berlin, and Film Artist Association of Serbia, and he has worked as a professor at various international institutes and conducted numerous master classes at film festivals in Europe and in Latin America. At this festival, his film Enclave is being shown in the international competition section. I won't go into the detailed storyline because I leave that to him, but it narrates the determination of a 10-year-old boy to give a proper community burial to his grandfather 5 years after the end of the Civil War in Serbia. Mr. Jason Silverman from the United States has, to his credit, many award-winning films. He's a long-time film festival director, so for him this is something which is familiar. And he has produced large-scale events for the Smithsonian, the Lenzik Center for the Arts, the Tribeca Film Festival, and the Lenan Foundation. His film Semben, in the documentary section, is a story of an ordinary man in Africa, if we can call him ordinary, who transforms himself into a fearless spokesperson for the marginalized and becomes a hero for millions. So the ground rules are that since we are streaming this on the social media, if you want to ask a question, please use the microphone, identify yourself with your organization. First, I'd request Mr. Radovanovic to give a brief introduction, followed by Mr. Silverman, and then we can have the floor open to questions.
I mean, going back to the facts, you know, my family name is Radovanovic. Always missing, but you know. No, it's my second time to India, you know. I was, for the first time, 25 years ago. It was my first short film, my debut film, and called Voigtlander 1896. And short fiction film that I made, and my first international film festival was Mumbai, and I think it was the first edition of this international film festival. So, 25 years later, I'm coming again, and so, you know, I'm trying, you know, I had to make kind of resume what I did. So, I started as a fiction filmmaker, my career, starting to write scripts for the fiction films, started to direct shorts, and then the wars came to Yugoslavia, so I was obliged to switch to so-called cheaper formats, from 35 to 16, from 16 to beta, from beta to mini, whatever, and then from fiction film to documentary, because it was somehow I was surrounded by catastrophe, social catastrophe by the wars, huge social tensions in Serbia in the 90s. So simply I couldn't make any fiction, you know. My imagination was really nothing comparing with the reality. So I became a documentary filmmaker, and then 5, 7, 8 years ago, I had this necessity to go back to fiction. And this is my second fiction film, and yeah, this is the story.
I think the subject of my film would have approved of your journey. The subject of Semben is Usman Semben, who was, as a boy in Senegal, was kicked out of school at a young age. He became a manual laborer from the age of 14. And when he was in his 30s, he had emigrated to Marseille, France, to look for work. He broke his back working on the docks of Marseille, and when he was recovering, began reading from the world literature, and realized that Africa was missing from the world literature. There were stories, you know, the stories you were reading were American stories, and some stories from Asia, and stories from America, but none from Africa. And so this dock worker who had very limited education and didn't know how to write, decided that he would teach himself how to write so that he could write stories for the African working class, which was a quite incredible leap of faith for him to take. And he became a successful novelist, writing these stories, and something of a phenomenon in French literary circles. When Senegal declared its independence from France in 1960, Sembène returned home, ready to serve his people, particularly the working class. But he realized that the novels and the literature would not work for his people because there's a 90% illiteracy rate in his country, and no one can afford to buy books. So he took another giant leap of faith and taught himself how to make movies. And he made his first film in 1963 in a place where there was very little electricity, there was no resource, there were no labs, there was no equipment. He had had a brief training in Moscow, and he brought back from Moscow with him a 16mm camera. His friends in France sent him film, leftover pieces of film that he shot on, and in 1963 he shot the first sub-Saharan film made by an African for Africans. He went on to make a number of other films. He worked for 50 years in these conditions, and he was a true hero to the Black Power movement and to other filmmakers who were also working from the ground level to tell stories about their people. We have a photo that's not in the film of Sembène with Sajid Ray. The two of them were, of course, like-minded, and so Sembène came to visit India. And he wrestled, he told stories eventually that challenged all the corruption and tribalism of Africa. And his films were banned both in France and in various countries in Africa. He struggled mightily. He spent 30 years trying to make his great opus and failed. And at the age of 83, he made his final film. He was going blind, he had cancer, and he went out and made a film that won an award at the Cannes Film Festival called Molade. So Sembène is the story of Ousmane Sembène, and it's also the story of my creative partner, Samba Gachigo, who as a boy was deeply influenced by Sembène's work, and decades later went back to find Sembène, found him, and helped resuscitate his career.
Yes, any questions?
My question to Mr. Goran. Yesterday I had to
Talk with you after conclusions of the movie in Kala Academy. I did one question to you. In Kala Academy, your movie.
Yeah.
So, actually I was not satisfied with your answer. Why not?
Can you
Because-
repeat the question? I'm really confused here.
Actually, the Nana
Yeah.
and the Serbian boy, you put one dialogue over there that we are playing when they are firing in the bell, you know, on the bell. They are firing on the bell.
Firing on the
Bell.
yeah?
Yeah. So it is a game going on to that boy hiding inside the bell. Okay.
Yeah.
From there, that boy was hit by some other, say, bullet. Who was injured? You know, the boy, when he was firing on the bell,
Yeah.
and he was injured by another bullet. So you transferred him to his home, and they came over there and they fired the bell structure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From there, after that, you have shown a few things and shifted to that this boy is going to Belgrade. So it is a joke to the audience. You know, those who are watching the movie, a joke. But you manage it through a flashback. Okay. So, but there was a dialogue that boy was uttering, come back. So I ask you, is it related to the remembrance he had or experience from his, say, friend when they were playing? So now, why you have these, first you have given the joke to the audience, and then now later on you have given the solution. So why you have given this chart? Is it a say technically you want to break the grammar?
You know, it was the peak of drama, you know, and the solution, it's always boring. You know. And if I would keep on making, like you suggested, or everybody's accepted, you wouldn't ask me this question, you know.
No, I asked yesterday.
No, I mean, metaphorically. That's why the audience keep watching the film and questioning what happened,
Yeah.
how the boy is alive,
Yeah.
and I wanted the audience to have it in their mind, and that was my way of storytelling, to provoke and to squeeze the emotion.
Right.
So that was just a simple directors and editors film language decision, how to tell the story and to have the parallel, the peak, the end of the storytelling to combine with the peak emotion, and we did it in this way.
No, but that boy you shifted to Belgrade, he was studying in this school,
Yeah.
he got some teasing. The audience, those who watch that movie, they have questioned who fired that boy, number one. No, number one. Secondly, how he actually survived. So to give these solutions, then you use this phrase. I think, is it regularly required to the audience? Because audience has taken, anyway he has seen.
No, regarding this, I think it's a misunderstanding. The boy that was injured, it is Albanian boy, and it was, we call it ricochet. So he was shooting at a ball, and the bullet came back. Yeah. And what is the problem with this?
No, bounce. But another shot was there. At that time, the army, say that, what is called, artillery, they are coming. They are also fired. Next shot was there.
No, nobody was firing.
No, it was there. They are firing over there.
I mean, did you watch the same film, or it's linguistic? I have some linguistic problems because English is not my native language.
Your movies, because these international competitions we put in this. So each and every shot I was.
You liked all of the other shots, though, just not this one. You liked all of the other shots, just not this one.
Anyway, he was convinced, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alfie from All India Radio. This question is to you, Jason. What is the kind of research that was required for a film like Samban? Is there a book? And if not, then is there plans for a book now? Because it seems quite interesting.
My creative partner, Samba Gajiko, is Semben's biographer. So in a sense, this film he started researching Semben in 1989 when they first met. So in a sense, this film has 24 years of research. The stories that we didn't tell are incredible, and Samba has published the first volume of the biography, which takes us through 1956. We're working on the second volume, and it really is a fascinating story. The story that we tell in the film is limited to a kind of emotional arc, which is necessary for cinema, rather than one filled with a lot of theory and ideology and context. We have to do that in very brief strokes in the film, but those contexts are actually quite fascinating, and the details of his life are quite fascinating. And there's so many amazing stories that we wish we could have gotten in. They're all part of the first volume, and hopefully will be part of the second volume. But there's a vast amount of research into this, and a lot to be written. And hopefully the film is just the start of telling this embedded story. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Radovanovic, I had a question regarding the sort of films that are being made in Serbia or in the other former Yugoslav republics regarding the period of the Civil War. Is there a very rich series of movies or features which are coming out of that period, because it was a very traumatic period for the
Yeah, I would say, in each country, from ex-Yugoslav states, republics like Slovenia, Croatia particularly, Bosnia, and Serbia, we made not a lot of films, but several films on this traumatic issue, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And but this is the first film that was made on Kosovo issue. And the Kosovo, probably, I don't know if you knew it. It was the first country. Serbia was the first country which was bombed by NATO pact after the Second World War. And I had the pleasure to be bombed by the American bombs, wearing American jeans, watching American films, and drinking bourbon, my favorite, Jim Beam. It was really turning point in my life, to feel the evil in the air and to feel the evil on the ground. And we used to have a Milosevic system. Milosevic was a kind of troublemaker in the Balkans, but just later on, Americans made a peace agreement with him, and he was a kind of hero and peace guarantee of peace on the Balkans. And a couple of years ago, then he was again a butcher of the Balkans, and we had bombs in Serbia. And now in Kosovo we have the biggest American NATO base, 50,000 soldiers. What to say? It's a sad story. We are small, frustrated nations. 5 million, 2 million, 7 million people. Serbia is the biggest nation next to Yugoslavia. About 8 million people. We have religion, Christians, Orthodox, Catholics, we have Muslims, the small region, and we are all manipulated by these big, so-called big nations, And it's a tragedy, Now we are, trying to try to live and work and live together again, or side by side. And somehow Kosovo is hot potato because it's still the war didn't finish. This state, obviously it's a NATO state. India didn't recognize it. Most of the third world countries didn't recognize it. Only NATO countries really pushing. Russia is not still didn't recognize this country. It's an obvious NATO country. You cannot found a country, establish a country with NATO troops. And the consequence of NATO bombing that 300,000 Serbs had to leave Kosovo, civilians, in the presence of NATO military troops, And they came, they said, to prevent the humanitarian catastrophe. Nowadays, 16 years ago, we have Kosovar, Albanian people escaping from this paradise country, like immigrants, like Syrians to Western Europe, The Serbs are living in in enclaves, in limited physical spaces. And I wanted to, it's hard, still we don't know what is going to be solution there, They are Christians, Serbs are Christians, Albanians are Muslims, so it's a huge conflict there, still going on. It's a, burning conflict, and it's hard life there. And I think it's a unique place in Europe, definitely, that people have no freedom of movement, You see the young boys visiting the school in a K4 military vehicle, and that's the truth. Nowadays, it's not like this. It was 2004. Nowadays, the kids are escorted with the vans, but with the fence, And all the things like devastating the graveyards or stoning the buses still are going on. So I wanted to make a film to show it, but not to show it from a Serbian point of view. I want to make really film on reconciliation, because NATO troop is not going to bring us reconciliation. You know, European Union also not. I mean, a big corporation as well not. So we have to live together in the future. My generation, didn't manage to live in peace. So I think that's why I made this film for the younger generation to say there must be a hope. It's not normal to live in hatred. It's hard. It's easier to live in love and to communicate through love.
Your film celebrates celebrates father of African cinema.
No, that's.
That is the guy. This is the African cinema.
Okay. Your film celebrates father of African cinema, which took 50 long years to give voice to African cinema. So can you please elaborate on that? What a sound to say African cinema.
Yeah, well, Semben worked for 50 years, but certainly there's not a strong African cinema now, so the battle has only begun, I think. And when Semben started working and writing in the 50s, the concern was colonization, was the European mindset that had infiltrated Africa, that European stories and culture had replaced African stories and culture. Today, the fear is more, I think, that a corporate, multinational, commodity-driven mindset has taken over Africa, not just Africa, everywhere. And so the battle is still being fought. Who gets to tell the stories? You know, is it the people who live in these cultures, or are they injected into those cultures from New York and Paris? And so the battle goes on. You know, when Africa now, you turn on the TV and it's BBC and Arte and bad American soap operas, and there's almost no African content. And I imagine the same is true, less so here, but to some extent here, where Indian culture is under is being lost to some extent under the swamp of kind of multinational culture. So our film tells Semben's story because we want his work to be replicated. We want other people to pick up the camera and use it as a weapon of cultural defense and cultural preservation. And we hope that his story will inspire people to tell their own stories. You know, when Semben started making movies in the early 1960s, it was really hard to make movies. You know, working with a 16 or 35 millimeter film in a place like Senegal was incredibly challenging. Today, with anyone who has a cell phone has a video camera, and films can be edited on a laptop. And so the opportunities for people to tell their own stories exist in ways that they never have before. So hopefully Semben's legacy lives on, and his inspiration will live on, and hopefully this film can do a little part to encourage that.
Couple of questions for Goran. You mentioned you use different formats for film. How did that affect your storytelling? And you said that you came here 25 years ago. What has been the change that you have seen now in the content and in the way the festival presents itself?
No, I was mentioning the 4 months, because I was just wanted, it was a metaphor that, I started as a fiction filmmaker. I had an opening film in Moscow as a screenwriter. It was 1989, and then, it was 35 millimeter. I made 2 shorts, 35 millimeter. It was really perfect time for me, good start. And then, we have embargo, wars, the biggest inflation, the history of the world, the loaf of bread cost in the morning 5 million dinars, in the noon 50 millions, afternoon there is no bread, and this stuff. So that was a metaphor when I saying, cheaper format. I mean, for 2 years I was doing nothing, regarding the bit. And what was the...
You said that you came
yeah,
here.
India, it's hard to judge, it's hard to judge because I was in Mumbai, I was I stayed 10 days, I was in love with one French girl director, I stayed in Hotel Oberoi, everything was luxury. I really knew that I was afraid to get out, a very sensitive person, when I saw children bargaining, etc. I had but everything was so tensive, and I met fascinating, good intellectuals and filmmakers. They stayed in communication. But nowadays, what I saw, it's hard to judge. I just landed into Bombay, came here, But I think that we are all living in one so-called global world, and I think that India became more consumers country, and in this sense, I noticed this so-called development, Of course, I follow the IT sector. Is growing up. It's very tough. It's hard. I know, but it's a theory. But what I saw, it's physically what I saw. Visually, I see that India is improving in terms of consuming.
Thank you. This is Mr. Silverman. He preferred the press conference and the first to India, obviously. So, what are your impressions? It's just a day since you've come, I think.
I haven't gotten out much. I've been in the hotel and at the festival, so my experience is limited. But it's been a very welcoming place, and I'm very eager to see more and take in all that I can in my limited time here. And I appreciate the level of hospitality. It's been incredible. The festival has a great reputation outside of India. You should know. So sometimes people don't understand that when they're in a city, how a festival's reputation is actually spread. And I'm in the festival world, and so people do talk about IFFI as a festival, as a destination, and so we appreciate, the filmmakers really appreciate all that you do here.
Thank you. So, if there's no questions, or there's one more.
My question is to Mr. Goran Radovanovic. Is it because of the intense political battles, wars, which are happening in your country, or why do films always, especially films coming from your country, a representation of the political battles? And are there films made for entertainment only, purely?
There are so many. There are so many, but they're not getting out of the country. It's a global issue. You don't expect to watch the horror film from Iran. You want to see good art from Iran. So also from Serbia, you don't expect to see a love story. You expect to see something that is crucial for this society. We have a lot of films also dealing about economical problems, transition problems, etc., etc. I think even this Greek genius director Theo Angelopoulos died on the set. Died on the set, had an accident on the set. He was making a film about economical problems in Greece, So, but this is the world market, we are not interested to get a film from India, entertaining film from India to watch in Belgrade. We would like to see you know, a social drama or a big drama, art house from India, you know. This is, but there are many entertaining films, you know, imitating Hollywood as well, genre films, and so.
There are no more questions, and